My name is Judy Peck, and I'm 27 years old. If you asked me a year ago who I was, I would have said a woman in love, a bride-to-be, someone about to start her happily ever after. I used to believe in fairy tales, not the Disney kind, with castles and magic spells, but the ones you hope for in real life. The story where you meet your person, build a future together, and face the world as a team. For 5 years, I thought I was living that fairy tale with Ethan. We met in college, sitting next to each other in a literature class neither of us had planned on taking. He cracked a joke about the professor's monotone voice, and I laughed louder than I should have. That moment sparked something simple, something safe. At least it felt that way then. We fell in love fast. The kind of love where you memorize someone's coffee order, their worst fears, the way they tap their pen when they're nervous. Ethan knew I hated thunderstorms, so he always texted me the forecast. I knew he liked his shirts folded military style, even though he never served a day in his life. We fit together piece by piece until we believed nothing could break us. By the time I turned 27 and Ethan 26, we were engaged. 6 months from walking down the aisle. The save the dates had been mailed. The venue was booked, vendors pinned to the corkboard in our apartment, a rainbow of sticky notes mapping our future. That corkboard was the last thing we built together that felt real before the walls started to crack. Looking back, the red flags weren't subtle. They weren't small nudges. They were bright flares I refused to see. At first, it was little arguments over the budget, over whether to invite my distant cousins over, how much his parents were contributing. That's normal, I told myself. Wedding stress, nothing more. But then came the silences. Ethan started spending long hours on his phone, grinning at messages I couldn't see. When I'd ask who it was, he'd shrug and say, "Just a friend." I wanted to believe him. Trust was the foundation of our relationship, wasn't it? If I started questioning him, it would mean the foundation wasn't there at all. So I didn't push. I laughed off my gut instinct and told myself every couple goes through phases. Then came the new job. Ethan got promoted, transferred into a different department. At first, I was thrilled for him. I even threw a small celebration in our apartment balloons, taped to the ceiling, a bottle of champagne chilled in the fridge. But within weeks, I couldn't escape her name, Lila. Every story he told about work somehow circled back to her. Lila's brilliant. Lila came up with this marketing pitch that blew everyone away. His eyes lit up when he said her name, a light I hadn't seen directed at me in months. He described her as ambitious, driven, a real go-getter. Then, almost casually, he'd add, "You know, a lot of people our age are just safe." Safe. I didn't realize it then, but that was the first quiet cut. The word slid under my skin like a blade. Was I safe? Predictable. The woman who loved routines, who balanced a budget, who dreamed of the Amalfi Coast for our honeymoon instead of some exotic, impulsive adventure. I brushed it off. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and told him I was proud of him. But a knot had formed in my stomach that never quite unraveled again. A few weeks later, the knot grew tighter. We were reviewing honeymoon options when he suddenly said, "Bali. Let's do Bali." Bali. That wasn't on our list. We had always talked about Italy, the Amalfi Coast lemon groves, sunsets on cliff sides. That was our dream. I asked why the change. His answer was strange, almost careless. "Lila went recently. She said it's amazing. Way better than Italy." The air in our apartment shifted. The corkboard, once a monument to our shared dreams, now looked like a map of compromises only I seemed to care about. For the first time, I realized Ethan's heart might already be somewhere else. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of me or of her. I told myself not to spiral, not to become the jealous fiancé. But when I reached for his hand in the dark and found only cold sheets, the truth pressed harder. Something was slipping away. I still believed in fairy tales, but maybe this was the part no one talked about, the chapter where the prince looks at another princess and decides happily ever after isn't enough. I didn't know it then, but the story I thought was mine was about to be rewritten without me. The day my world broke apart was a Sunday. Ethan and I drove to his parents' house for a family dinner. I remember staring out the passenger window, the late sun sliding across the glass, feeling an unease I couldn't name. The air in the car was heavy with silence. He scrolled his phone at every red light, grinning at messages I didn't dare ask about anymore. When we pulled into the driveway, I forced a smile. His mother had gone all out: roast beef, mashed potatoes, homemade apple pie. A table set like a holiday. The warmth of it should have comforted me, but instead it pressed on my chest like I was performing in a play I didn't audition for. Dinner started light. His father asked about work, his mother bragged about Ethan's promotion, and I did what I always did, smile, nod, keep the peace. I thought I was doing well. Until his uncle leaned back in his chair, glass of wine in hand, and looked directly at me. "You've got a good one here, Ethan," he said. "Judy's dependable, loyal, the kind of woman you build a life with." I blushed, embarrassed by the attention, but proud too. I waited for Ethan to smile, to agree to place his hand on mine the way he used to. Instead, he smirked. That sharp, crooked smirk I'd started to hate. "Yeah," he said, tilting his glass. "She's safe." The word landed like a stone in my stomach. His uncle chuckled, not catching the edge in his voice. But I did. Every nerve in my body went still. I turned to him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear, though his eyes glinted with the thrill of being cruel. "It means you've got your life planned out. House in the suburbs, a savings account, maybe 2 kids and a dog. Secure, predictable, safe." I felt my throat tighten. And that's a problem. He didn't flinch. He didn't soften. Instead, he gave a hollow laugh, then whispered words that froze the room around me. "I don't want safe, Judy. I want more. That's why I've been seeing Lila." The world tilted. The voices of his family blurred into static. I could hear forks against plates, his mother fussing in the kitchen, but it all sounded 1,000 miles away. What the words scraped out of me barely audible. He leaned back casual, as if confessing a parking ticket. Exactly what it sounds like. We clicked. She's ambitious, exciting. She wants to live big, not just exist. I sat paralyzed, the engagement ring on my finger, suddenly burning a shackle of humiliation. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the clatter of the dining room. "You're joking," my voice cracked, desperate for denial. But he shook his head, that smug smirk widening. "I'm not going to apologize for it. It was a mistake, sure, but a necessary one. Showed me what I was missing." Something in me cracked. The girl who believed in fairy tales, who built corkboards of dreams, who defended his silences, she shattered right there at that dinner table. And Ethan didn't stop. He leaned in again, like delivering the final blow in some twisted performance. "We're on different paths, Judy. You're happy with normal. I need more." His mother called from the kitchen. "Dessert's ready." Ethan straightened, smoothed his shirt, and smiled like nothing had happened. He got up to help her carry plates, leaving me frozen in my chair, invisible. The smell of apple pie drifted into the room. His uncle poured more wine. His sister scrolled on her phone. Life around me kept moving, while mine had just collapsed in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stood slow and deliberate, like moving through water. My hand slid the wedding binder off the side table. I pulled my half of the plans from the pocket and placed it neatly on the arm of the couch. Then I slipped off the ring, that heavy mocking band of gold. I set it down beside the binder. And with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I walked out the front door. The sound of laughter and cutlery followed me down the hallway like an echo from another life. The walk to my car felt endless. Every step was heavier than the last, but my body kept moving, because staying meant suffocating. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel. My chest rose and fell, but no tears came, no screams. Just a cold, hollow silence, as if every emotion had been scraped clean out of me. The fairy tale was dead, and Ethan had buried it with a smirk. The hours after that dinner blurred together like a film reel playing too fast. I don't remember the drive home, only that I sat in the car for a long time before moving. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. The apartment was dark when I stepped inside. Our apartment. The place where we had mapped out a future where the corkboard of dreams still hung above the desk, mocking me. I switched on the light and stared at it. Flight confirmations we never booked. Fabric swatches for bridesmaids' dresses. A Polaroid of us smiling at the venue tour. All of it felt like artifacts from a life that no longer belonged to me. I grabbed a cardboard box from the closet. The sound of it scraping against the floor felt like the start of a ritual. I began gathering his things, his cufflinks, his gym bag, the cologne that lingered too strong in the bathroom. Every item I placed into the box was a cut, severing me from the illusion of us. The apartment, once alive with our routines, quickly became a hollow museum. A toothbrush left on the counter, a pair of sneakers by the door, relics of a man who had already moved on long before he confessed. I moved mechanically because if I stopped, I might break. When the boxes were lined neatly by the front door, I sat on the couch and stared at them. It looked too tidy, too final, like I'd been preparing for this all along. Maybe deep down I had. The next morning I made the calls. The venue first. The woman on the phone sounded shocked. Then awk, Peckley sympathetic. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, her voice soft. I'll process the cancellation. Then the caterer, the photographer, the DJ. Each call chipped away at me. Each polite voice on the other end reminded me of the life I was dismantling piece by piece. When I finally hung up the last call, the silence in the apartment roared. There were still 2 calls left, the hardest ones. My parents. I dialed my mother's number with trembling fingers. She picked up on the second ring, her warm voice immediately sensing something was wrong. Judy, honey, what's happened? The words caught in my throat. The wedding? It's off. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. What do you mean? Did you and Ethan? He ended it, I said quickly before the tears could come. There's someone else. The weight of the words nearly crushed me, but my mother's voice steadied. Oh, sweetheart. Her tone was layered with heartbreak and fury. Come home. You don't need to explain. Just come home. I promised I would visit soon, but not tonight. Tonight I needed to finish the severing. The last call was the one I dreaded most, Ethan's mother. She answered cheerfully, unaware of the wreckage. Judy. Did Ethan finally confirm the caterer? I've been reminding him all week. I closed my eyes. No, Mrs. Hayes. I'm calling to tell you, there won't be a wedding. The line went silent. I could almost hear her heartbeat in the stillness. What happened? She finally whispered. Ask your son, I replied. My voice was calm, almost detached. I wish you well. I hung up before she could ask more. It wasn't my responsibility to explain her son's cruelty. That night, I sent Ethan the only message I would ever write to him again. Your things are at the door. The wedding is canceled. Goodbye, Ethan. I placed my phone face down on the desk and turned the ringer off. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't waiting for a reply. The silence pressed in on me, cold and vast. But within that silence, there was a strange kind of peace. The woman who had once believed in forever with Ethan no longer existed. She had died at that dinner table, smothered by his smirk and his betrayal. And in her place was someone else. Someone I didn't know yet, but someone who would not beg, would not break, and would not look back. The unmaking of a life was complete. All that was left was to start again. The weeks after the breakup stretched into months. At first, every day felt like trudging through mud, slow, heavy, exhausting. But time, as it always does, carried me for Peck. I poured myself into routine. The gym in the mornings, work during the day, long walks in the evening. Silence became less suffocating and more like a shield. My apartment, stripped of Ethan's things, echoed at first. But gradually, it began to sound like mine again. For a while, I didn't think about him. Not consciously, but the world has a cruel way of serving news you never asked for. It began with small things. A mutual friend trying to tread carefully messaged me one night. Hey Judy, I'm really sorry about everything. I heard Ethan and Lila are complicated right now. I read it twice, then set the phone aside. I didn't reply. I didn't need details. But a seed of curiosity had been planted. A few weeks later, I saw them. It was at a friend's birthday party. I almost didn't go, afraid of pitying looks and whispered questions. But something inside me wanted to reclaim the space, to prove to myself I wasn't defined by his betrayal. The party buzzed with laughter and music when I spotted them across the room. Ethan, dressed in a sleek suit that looked almost too expensive, stood with Lila draped over his arm. She laughed loudly at every joke, her voice pitched just a little too high, her hand clutching his sleeve like she needed the world to see. For a moment, the sight of them together stung like salt in an open wound. But then I looked closer. Ethan's smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. His phone buzzed constantly in his hand, and each time he glanced at it with an edge of desperation. He wasn't enjoying the party he was performing, putting on a show. And Lila, she was radiant on the surface, but her laughter had a brittle edge. Her gaze flicked around the room, searching, measuring. She looked less like a woman in love and more like an actress terrified of losing the spotlight. I kept my distance, but whispers carried. 2 women near me lowered their voices, not knowing I could hear. She complains about money all the time. He says he has investors, but no one's actually seen proof. Their words trailed off when Lila passed by, her perfume heavy in the air. But the damage was done. The cracks were showing. Later that night, I found myself outside on the balcony, breathing in the cool air, trying to calm the storm inside me. A friend joined me, hesitant. I know you don't want to hear about him, she began softly. But people are starting to wonder. He's living big, but no one knows how. It doesn't add up. I nodded, saying nothing. Inside, though, something shifted. For months, I had carried the humiliation of being left behind. But watching them, listening to those whispers, I realized the roles were reversing. They weren't untouchable, they weren't golden. They were fragile, standing on a glass floor, already splintering beneath them. And me, I was still standing. For the first time since the dinner that destroyed me, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to hope for. Not revenge, not triumph. Strength. The storm that had once swallowed me was now circling them, and I was watching from a distance untouchable. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen table sipping tea after a long day when my phone buzzed with a notification. At first, I ignored it, but then another came, and another. Texts, headlines, messages lighting up the screen like sparks in the dark. When I finally picked it up, the words hit like a punch to the chest. Local entrepreneur Ethan Hayes indicted for securities fraud. I froze, staring at the screen. The article was brutal in its detail. Ethan had been raising money for a company that didn't exist. Promises of investments, glossy presentations, fake contracts. For years, he had been spinning illusions, and the lifestyle that once seemed ambitious and dazzling was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. The suits, the trips, the expensive dinners with Lila, it was all stolen from people who had trusted him. And Lila, her name was in the article too. Complicit, they called it. Not as deeply involved as Ethan, but implicated nonetheless. The glamorous partner now reduced to a footnote in a scandal. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. No anger, no gloating, just quiet. It was as though a storm had finally broken far away and I could only hear the distant thunder. I thought back to that night at his parents' dinner table, the smug look on his face, the way he said he wouldn't apologize, the way he called me safe, like it was an insult. And now, safe was freedom. Safe was peace. Safe was not standing in the wreckage of a ruined empire built on lies. The next morning, I walked to a cafe near my office. I ordered coffee and sat by the window, watching people hurry past with their own lives, their own secrets. For the first time in months, the air around me felt light. My phone buzzed again. This time from friends, acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know if I'd seen the news. I responded to only one, a simple message. Yes, I saw. I'm fine. Because I was. Ethan's collapse wasn't my victory. It wasn't even my fight. It was the natural end to the choices he made, the lies he told, the life he built on shifting sand. Justice had come not with sirens and handcuffs I witnessed firsthand, but with headlines and whispers spreading like wildfire. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to lift a finger. The world had done it for me. As I sipped my coffee, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not the desperate kind that comes from hoping someone will come back, but the steady kind, the kind that comes when you finally know the storm that once consumed you has moved on, and this time it isn't coming back. The fairy tale he left me for had turned into a nightmare. And I was awake. It started with a text. Hey, Judy. I know this is a long shot, but it's me. I'm sure you've heard about what happened. Things are really bad right now. I need someone to talk to. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. For a heartbeat, I almost felt the old reflex, the pull to respond to comfort. That was who I used to be, the woman who soothed him when he failed, who believed his half-truths. But that woman was gone. I set the phone down. No reply. The next day, another text, then another. I feel so stupid. I made a mistake, Judy. I'm so sorry. You always listen to me. Can we talk? The words were hollow. They weren't apologies for betrayal. They were pleas for a soft landing. For someone to catch him now that the world had turned its back. I ignored them. Silence became my answer. Days later, the tone shifted. Are you just going to ignore me after everything I thought you were a decent person? I know you're seeing these. This is low, Judy. Real low. I almost laughed at the absurdity. He had cheated, humiliated me, dismantled our future with a smirk, and now my silence was the cruelty. Still, I didn't reply. But Ethan didn't stop at me. He found another way in. One evening, my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I answered immediately, worried. Judy, honey, her voice was tight, uneasy. Ethan called me. My blood ran cold. What did he say? He was crying. He said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he's lost everything. He begged me to tell you he's not the same person anymore, that he's learned his lesson. She paused. He sounded desperate. I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly. Desperate was exactly what he was. Mom, I said, my voice steady. He's trying to use you to get to me. Please don't talk to him again. This isn't our burden. It's his. Her breath hitched. I just didn't know what to say. Say nothing, I answered firmly. Block his number. Don't let him drag you into this. I've moved on and you need to as well. There was a silence on the line. Then her voice softened, full of pride. You've become so strong, Judy. I'll do what you say. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, hands folded in my lap. Ethan's world had collapsed, and he was clawing at the wreckage, trying to pull me back into the ruins with him. But I refused. Every unanswered text, every ignored plea, every boundary I held each was a brick in the wall between us. And behind that wall, I was building something new. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but it would be mine, and it would never again include him. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. Daniel and I had plans for dinner at a new restaurant downtown, one that had just opened and was buzzing with reviews. We walked in hand, laughing about something silly he'd said in the car. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was light, free. And then I saw him, Ethan. He sat near the entrance at a small table alone. No suit this time, no polished confidence. Just a man hunched over his phone, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He looked smaller than I remembered. My steps faltered, but Daniel squeezed my hand gently. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine." We were led to a table across the room. I told myself I wouldn't look again, but when I glanced up, his eyes were already on me, wide, shocked. He saw Daniel. He saw me smiling. And in that instant, the roles shifted. The man who once smirked as he told me he wanted more, now stared like a ghost who'd just realized what he'd lost. Minutes later, he stood and started walking to peck us. Daniel noticed. "Do you want me to—" "No," I said softly. "Let me handle this." Ethan stopped at our table. His eyes darted between us, his hands trembling slightly. "Judy, can I talk to you?" "Just for a minute. Alone." I looked at him, calm, my face a mask of composure. Then I gestured to Daniel. "Ethan, this is Daniel. Daniel, this is Ethan." Ethan flinched at the formality, like a door slamming shut. "Please," he whispered, leaning closer. "Things are bad. Lila's gone. My family won't even pick up the phone. His voice cracked. "I'm so alone. I miss you. I miss us." For a long moment, I studied him. The man who once mocked my stability, who threw away our future with a smirk, now stood before me, begging for scraps of mercy. I drew a slow breath. "The woman who wanted to marry you doesn't exist anymore," I said evenly. "She died the night you told her you weren't sorry." His face crumpled, but I didn't stop. The woman standing here now has a new life, a new plan, and she's never been happier. I glanced at Daniel, whose hand rested steady on mine. "Judy, please," Ethan whispered, his voice desperate, raw. "You don't understand." I cut him off, my tone final. "I do understand. And I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it isn't here, and it will never be with me." The restaurant buzzed around us, clinking glasses, quiet laughter, the hum of conversations. But between us, silence stretched sharp and unyielding. Ethan opened his mouth again, but no words came. His eyes glistened, his shoulders sagged. He looked like a man finally realizing the cost of his choices. I turned back to Daniel, resuming our conversation as if Ethan had already left. My voice was steady, calm, warm. After a long, painful pause, Ethan stepped back. He lingered for a moment, then turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go, because the chapter was closed, and I was done rereading it. After that night at the restaurant, something inside me shifted for good. I had braced myself for years against the ghost of Ethan, his betrayal, his absence, his shadow over my life. I had feared that no matter how much I rebuilt, some part of me would always ache, always wonder what might have been. But when he walked away that evening, hunched and broken, I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even pity. Just freedom. For so long, I thought strength would come from confrontation, from screaming, demanding answers, making him feel the weight of the pain he caused me. But in the end, my silence had been louder than any words. My refusal to go back, my refusal to even dignify his pleas with a response that was my revenge. And it was enough. In the weeks that followed, I found myself laughing more. Daniel and I explored new restaurants, took weekend trips, filled our days with small, ordinary joys that felt extraordinary because they were ours. My friends said I seemed lighter, my smile brighter. I think they were right. Sometimes, though, I would catch myself remembering. Not the love, not the pain, but the lesson. I had once believed that fairy tales ended when someone chose another over you. That betrayal was the final page. But I know now that's not true. The real ending comes when you stop letting their choices define your story. When you reclaim your voice. When you build your own future. When you realize that being safe was never a flaw, it was strength. Ethan's world collapsed, and I wasn't there to catch him. I wasn't there at all. because his story was no longer mine to live. My story is here, in this moment, in every step for Peck. And for the first time in a very long